Okay, guys, I think we are honest to goodness live this time, episode 58 of the Team House. I am Jack Murphy. I'm here with co-host Dave Park. We are here with our special guest tonight, Chuck Woodson.
Live now.
Oh my gosh.
It happened. It worked.
So a little bit of background, just real quick. Chuck's about to have a heart attack. We were out of the studio for like 6 months because of COVID. We went remote. Little by little, we've been back. We have been improving the microphones, trying to improve the audio and video quality, improving the lighting, building up a little bit of a set here, trying to class this thing up a little bit. I might have to dial down the light a little bit. I actually look a little too pink. But hey, that's a work in progress. At least we're actually streaming this time. So Chuck, he was a draftee. He served in Vietnam. He was down in Da Nang, and he went on to have a long Special Forces career. And he's also a Special Forces historian. He has interviewed a lot of the original members of Special Forces. So we're really excited to have him here today. Chuck, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you so much for being patient with us as we go through the paces here.
Oh, happy to be here, and thanks for the invitation, and I'm happy to participate and support your program.
Thank you so much. We kind of start off the show a lot of times, just kind of real simple question, like, who are you? Where did you come out of? How did you find your way into the military? How did that come about?
Well, that's a good question. I was in high school in the Monterey, California, Central California on the coast, Monterey Bay area. Graduated from Monterey High School, started going to a local community college, and at the time, this was in the early 60s, early to mid 60s, I got a draft notice because I was fooling around in college. I wasn't taking it seriously, and at that time, if you could get a deferment while you were going to college, but if you were just fooling around in college, they said no.
How did they know if you were fooling around or if you were taking it seriously?
They somehow had some tabs on me, and I was fooling around. So I got a draft notice in 1965, and was asked to show up. I think we went up to San Francisco, as I remember, and went through some medical examination stuff. And I remember my dad was a Navy man. He was 25 years in the Navy, and he said, "Son, I told you, join the Navy." And I said, "Yeah, you did, Dad, I remember, but I didn't really want to join any of the services at the time." And so I was drafted into the Army, ended up at Fort Ord, California, 1965, basic training. Very unhappy draftee, wanted to, because the Monterey Bay Area is my home and my hometown, and I wanted to just sneak out the window and escape. And
sure.
Of course, at that time, we had some kind of a, I can't remember some kind of a disease or something that we were forced to stay in the barracks, and we were isolated. I can't remember what it was now, but anyway, so we were cut off, and I was drafted 1965. June 1965, basic training, tried to flunk the entrance exam, wasn't cooperating, my head was in the urinal, or I was in KP. I was that guy doing all that stuff for about the first week or so, until a drill instructor took me inside and said, "I've been watching you, and you're not dumb because you're thinking about stuff and you're rebelling, and what's going on with you?" And actually, at the time, I was so upset, I started crying like I didn't want to be in the service, and he was listening to me in his little room at the end of our basic training barracks, and he said to me, he said, he says, "I'll tell you something. You're here. There isn't anything you can do about that.
Right.
What if we reverse this whole thing, and what if I told you that you had some opportunities if you started performing and And he said, and he's the one that mentioned Special Forces. He said, there's a unique unit in the Army, and he started talking to me about Special Forces, and I'll be damned if I was like, wow, now those guys sound cool.
Yeah.
He said, now you got to retake the test, and you've got to, start performing with the training and stuff. But he said, this could turn around, and this could give you some choices. And I'll be damned if that Special Forces recruiter showed up at our basic training barracks. And I remember he was in tiger fatigues. He was in tiger fatigues, had a beret on, and he was standing in front of us, and he was giving us one of these, like probably most of you guys wouldn't make it with Special Forces. And, it's not the kind of thing that, reverse psychology.
Right.
And he got me hook, line, and sinker, man. I said, wow, that is the coolest guy I ever saw. And that sounds like something I want to do. And so I signed up. I performed the rest of the basic training. I was one of the top trainees in the program, and ended up being assigned to Special Forces out of basic training, and set my entire career on an entirely different path. In fact, that decision and that interface with that drill instructor changed my whole life from that point on.
Sure.
Amazing.
And it's very interesting. You're the first person we've had on the show that had that resistance to the military, I think, that didn't sort of dream of it. But I also think that it's something that is more common than people acknowledge. Maybe not as common in an all-volunteer military like we have now, but people still sort of go through that at times. And it just takes sometimes that one person to sort of set you straight,
Yeah.
What was it, do you know what it was that was your reluctance to be in the service? Was it having grown up around it? Was it the war and not wanting to be there? I mean, obviously it wasn't that, because Special Forces drew you in.
No, yeah, it wasn't the common things that you think about back at that time. I think the fact that having been brought up with a Navy chief petty officer who had a specific way you cleaned the bathroom,
Right.
had a specific way you did chores, had a specific way, and I had been brought up with the military, and so. In high school, I just in my thinking, I thought, no, that's the last thing I want to be doing is going to the military, because I have been in the military.
Right. Yeah. You've been in basic training for 17 years.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't have anything about, the war or any of that kind of stuff. In fact, I ended up volunteering not only for jump school and Special Forces, but I also volunteered to go to Vietnam. So it wasn't those things. It was just the idea at my immature age of accepting what the military might do for me, which, by the way, looking back, I really needed.
Sure.
Big time. So it turned out to be a great thing for me, and I'm so thankful looking back to that drill sergeant that took the time to say, there's something about you that's not ringing true with your whole performance thing.
Right.
That turned me around. It was great.
Do you remember, do you remember specifically or what it was was it just him taking the time to talk to you, or was it his description of Special Forces and what that might be? Do you remember what it was that kind of created that shift for you?
I don't think it was just one thing. I think it was the combination of him taking time to talk to me. And when he said Special Forces, the things that got me was he talked about these small teams doing these, I can't remember the terms he used. Of course, I think of clandestine, all that
Right.
stuff, but I don't think he was using those terms. But he was talking about, like, the sneaky Pete stuff that they did, that they think outside the box, and they operate in these small teams, and those kinds of things just rang my bell. I was
Right.
like, wow, no, that sounds interesting. But he said to me, you have to be able to qualify for this. So this isn't just a given that you're gonna, be able to get right in. You're gonna have to perform at a level that says you're exceptional to be selected, And he got that. So after I left that thing, I started thinking, okay, you want me to perform? You want me to, I remember taking the test over. Of course, I tried to flunk the test, so that wasn't hard to do better on the test.
Right.
But the PT and the training and all that stuff, I went out of my way to not only perform well, but kind of outperform. I was driven after that.
Fascinating.
So how did that work out as far as like the selection at the time and, going out to Camp McCall? I mean, it was a whole different world back in I think it was 65, right?
Yeah, I got there in 66. By the time I went through AIT and jump school, I got there, I think early 66 or early 66 I got there. And I remember when we arrived, literally they put us on a bus from jump school to Bragg, and there was a busload of us. And I remember the bus had all these guys, and we didn't know each other. I think there was a couple of us that knew each other that were SF guys, or a potential going to be SF guys. But all the rest of the bus was 82nd Airborne. So this bus pulls up. It's dark 30, Smoke Bomb Hill. We arrive in front of the 82nd Airborne, and this big old badass senior NCO jumps on the bus and, all right, Chewie, get your asses off the bird. And we're like, holy shit, our life is about to end here. And we're all grabbing our rucksacks, or not our rucksacks, but our, what'd you call them, duffel bags, grabbing our duffel bags and trying to get off the bus. And the first thing he had us, we're all in the front laning rest position, all of us off the bus, in front of the 82nd Airborne. And I push him up, goddammit, and we're in as I remember, I think we're in our greens, as I remember. Right?
Yeah.
But we weren't in our PT stuff. And we're down there pushing up the ground, and, we're scared shitless. And the bus driver comes up to the big sergeant and says, hey, Sergeant so-and-so, he says, listen, I'm supposed to be taking some guys over here to Smoke Bomb Hill. And he goes, what are you talking about? He goes, well, I've got some guys that are supposed to go to Smoke Bomb Hill. And he's like, what? He goes, are some of you guys going over to, I can't remember what he called it, SF, but it wasn't a positive. And, and some of us, there was a couple handfuls of us like raising our hands, from the ground. And he goes, well, get the hell out of my forest, get your shit and get back on that bus, and like, holy shit. So we're, grabbing our shit again and scrabbling back on that bus. And I remember at that time thinking, I never forgot this, I'm thinking, if this is the 82nd Airborne, what are these next guys going to be like? I'm like, okay, because the bus, wasn't that far from the 82nd Airborne to Smoke Bomb Hill. And so we pull up in front of there, and I had my duffel bag, and I was like, before this guy even opens his mouth, I'm going to be off this goddamn bus, and I'm going to be ready to go. And here comes this SF guy on the bus, and he goes like this. He goes, oh my God, you guys must be exhausted. He goes, you've been up all night, and you've been, and this real calm voice, and he goes, I tell you what, he says, grab your gear and come on with me. I said, you're probably hungry too. He says, Jesus Christ. He goes, we got your rooms all made up. They literally had our rooms, our beds made. Our rooms were all ready for us. They held the goddamn cafeteria open, the mess hall, and it was open. We got to eat. He goes, and by the way, he goes, tomorrow, take the day off, get yourself, situated. Well, we got some paperwork you got to do. And I kept waiting for, okay.
Yeah.
This can't be,
He's setting us up.
Bite us in the ass here.
Yeah.
But it was just the opposite of the 82nd Airborne. And I never forgot that welcome.
I guess it was good motivation to make sure you passed the training and didn't get sent back to 82nd.
Exactly.
So what did Special Forces training consist of? What MOS were you was given to you, or did you select? How did the kind of doling out of MOSs and assignments kind of work back in those days?
Well, the one thing was, and I think it was one of the reasons they accepted me, looking back, was they needed radio operators in Vietnam. They were short radio operators. And so they were looking for radio operators. So I think, our proficiency tests and all the things we took for SF, I think we're looking for guys that were capable. I'm talking about draftees now. That was the only time that I know that SF was grabbing draftees, and I think they needed radio operators, and they're looking for guys that were going to be proficient with code and all that kind of stuff. And so I didn't have a choice. I was a radio operator. That was the path I was on from the time they had me in, or they accepted me. So at the time they were just, they were hurting for radio operators.
I'll take care of it.
No, it's okay, Dave. Don't worry about it. And then you said you volunteered for Vietnam. Oh, and before that, back in the day, I mean, it was all Morse code too.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. And let me tell you, Morse code and I weren't best of friends. I got in and that whole ditty stuff in my brain was like, it was hard for me. And I reached this point where I was at, I can't think how many groups a minute, but it was, you want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going. He's just working with the light over here.
Oh, okay. So I was having a tough time of it, and we had to be like, I think we had to have between 15 and 18 groups a minute or something at the time. And I reached this point where I was in like between 10 and 13, and I just couldn't get it. And my whole class had moved on, and they kept me there, and my brain was like, you can't do it. That's all you can do. I mean, you've reached your limit.
Right.
And at the time, and in the meantime, all my friends and buddies that I'd been with so far in the course had moved on, and I was still back there with the class behind me at this 13 or 15 or whatever it was.
Uh-huh.
And I remember this sergeant at the time, and he was telling me, he goes, I'll teach you a trick. And I remember he was an old SF guy, been around a long time, and he says, I'm going to teach you a little trick. And the trick is, I'm gonna put you at 18 to 20, and we're gonna skip where you're working, because I was at this 13, 15, I was just hammering this thing, and he jumped me up to this faster speed.
Uh-huh.
And at first I'm like, my brain's like, okay, no comprendo, I have no idea what this is. But pretty soon I started to pick up these characters and stuff at this faster pace.
Right.
And I'll be damned if that didn't help me go back and pass. I went back to almost 10, and then I went up to 12, and then, 13, 14, 15, and it was funny because he pushed me way up beyond what I could comprehend. And my brain started adjusting or something. It was weird.
He kind of tied you to the truck to teach you how to sprint, right?
I don't remember him threatening my life, but he was like, there's a way. Let me teach you this little trick.
Right.
It was so funny the way he did that, and I'll be damned if it didn't work. And then I ended up in a class behind me, and then graduated, and I was fortunate for a couple of things. Number one, this guy, and there was Ed Coffey, who was one of the instructors at training group, and Ed Coffey ended up going to Vietnam and actually being killed in Vietnam when I was over there. He was my mentor, and he worked with me with the hand-to-hand and the martial arts stuff and the operations planning and tactical stuff and all that stuff. He really mentored me through that whole thing, and was a reason that I got through training group. And then when I finished training group, I think Jack was asking, well, how the hell did you how the hell did you end up going to volunteering for Vietnam? And when I graduated, most of the guys, they didn't send you right to Vietnam on a training group because we weren't ready to go to training.
Right.
We needed team time and a lot of other training and stuff. but they were short radio operators. And I remember this big black E7, big black sergeant that was handling assignments. And I went in there and he says, "Okay, Woodson, we got a problem with you." And I thought, oh shit, now what? He says, "Well, you're only in for 2 years. You're a draftee. And you were supposed to re-up. And you haven't re-upped. And you only have, a little over 6 months left." And he goes, "I don't know what to do with you now. Get your ass down there and re-up, or you got to make some decisions." And I'm standing there thinking, you know what? No one ever mentioned anything about re-up to me. I didn't have that discussion.
Right.
So he said, "So here's your choice. Re-up," and he goes, "Frankly, I'll send you anywhere in the world you want to go. Or I'm putting you back into school. God damn it, I'm just going to cycle you back into one of the schools, and you're just going to spend the rest of your career here in a school." Or he goes, "I got a third option for you." He goes, "If you don't want to re-up, or you're not sure you want to re-up yet," he goes, "I'll tell you what, you extend for 6 months, and I'll send you to Vietnam." And I was sitting there, I remember standing in front of him thinking, okay, I could re-up, which at the time I didn't know I wanted to do. I sure as hell didn't want to go back to school. And I thought, go to Vietnam, why not? That
Right.
sounds great. 6
Sounds
more months,
great.
what the hell? I can hold my breath for that long,
Right.
And so I signed that paper, and he was so excited. And he had me go home, and this was the end of 66. Went home for a month or a month and a half or whatever, and then I got on a plane and right out of training group ended up in Vietnam with a whole nother big challenge as far as comms go, but ended up in Vietnam after that individually.
When you went home for that period of time, how did your folks sort of respond? Like, did they know you'd gone this special forces route? Did they know what that was?
You know what, honestly, I don't think they really knew what even Special Forces was
Right.
at the time. I remember my dad going, "You really missed it. I told you should have gone in the Navy," And my mom was kind of like, "Well, you did this Special Forces thing," and she goes, "How do you like it?" And I said, "Well, so far, I like it. It challenges me, and they push me. And of course, that time I spent at Bragg, I mean, those guys worked me pretty thoroughly. So when I was coming out of Bragg, I was a whole nother guy than the guy that went into Bragg.
Sure.
But I remember kind of being out of it because I've been in school all this time. I'm about to go to Vietnam, and the world around me at home had no relationship to what was going on,
Sure.
in my world. So I was kind of like, I remember my dad was, at the time he had retired, and he was working in this, at this hotel, and their sewage system had broken, and he's down in a trench digging up the goddamn sewage system and with poop and everything all around. He goes, "Son, why don't you come and help me dig up this trench?" And I thought, why not, And I remember standing there, and it smelled, and I'm down there about to go to Vietnam. I'm down there in a trench digging poop, and I'm wondering, what the hell am I doing? Shouldn't I be like doing something else?
Right.
Besides this. But I was with my dad, and it was some nice time spending with my dad, but I'll never forget that, being down in some galoshes digging poop right before I went to Vietnam.
Well, you were in the shit before you were in the shit.
Yeah, I got in the shit before I got in the shit.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you were on your way to Vietnam. When did you find out where you were going?
Well, I knew I was going from before I left.
Well, I mean, what part
What
of
do you mean,
Nam
where in
when you knew
Vietnam?
what fire base you were heading to?
I had no idea, and I have to tell you guys, when I got to Vietnam, the radio operators were using what they called a speed key, and it's as opposed to pushing a button and going da 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 da. You're going left and right, with your thumb and your forefinger, and you're pushing this key, and the thumb is the dots, and the other side of your hand, the forefinger is the dits. And they were doing 20, 22, 24 groups a minute, and I'm coming in at 18. And number one, now understand, I'm a PFC, in Special Forces. I'm arriving in Vietnam with no application of my training. I'm right out of training group. And I remember the senior guy at I think the 5th group was at Nha Trang, as I remember, if I remember right, the C team. But wherever the headquarters were, I was down there with the head of the comms guy, and he put me on the desk and started copying something, and I couldn't keep up with it. And plus the rhythm of that speed key was a whole different thing. And I said, what the hell are these guys doing? He goes, what do you mean? I said, I can't copy this. And he says, what do you mean you can't copy this? And I said, I can't copy this. And he's looking at me, and I remember the junior NCO, the E7, was so pissed off. He goes, what the are you doing here? We need radio operators, and they send this kid, what are you, right out of high school or something, is chewing my ass off. And of course I couldn't copy I couldn't do the comms. And so thank God the senior guy goes, okay. He goes, first off, we don't have PFCs here. You're the only PFC I've ever seen in Special Forces. He goes, secondly, we need somebody we can put on these teams. These teams need radio operators, and you can't even operate as a radio operator. He says, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick you up at Da Nang, which was the B team at Da Nang for I Corps, and I want you to spend some time and pick up your speed and get this speed key down. And so for the first couple of months, that's what I did. I mean, day and night, I'm doing code and practicing the speed key, and I did that for a couple of months because I was worthless to him.
Sure. Well, and I mean, did you notice gradual improvement? Because it was a system that you weren't used to using, so did it? Yeah.
And it was one of those things, you needed to listen to it, you needed to spend time with the key, and it took me a couple of months, and thank God I got it, and right after that they sent me to an A detachment up in I Corps. I was at A103 in Giavoc, which is a little burg out in the middle of nowhere, one of the camps. If you're familiar with, at that time they had these, I think they had, I don't remember how many camps they had, but all up and down, and they situated them in places where they could keep either secure or keep track of Charlie and the NVA and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And if you've seen any of those maps and you see those things, all these 8 camps were placed in these key locations where they put 12 Americans and normally 3 companies of, in my case, it was 2 companies of Montagnards and 1 company of South Vietnamese, and then we secured that area, and we watched what Charlie was doing on that piece of the Ho Chi Minh Trail that came down.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of the other guys on your A team when you showed up over there, and what type of people you were working with?
That was funny. I showed up, and they were just like the C team was. Here comes this PFC kid, radio operator, to pick up the radio things for the team, and they were looking at me like, what the hell is this? Because they had never seen a PFC either, in Special Forces, and here I am, and luckily the team sergeant took me under his wing, and it was like I was his son. He goes, okay, first off, because he had me pull up my rig, and he says, all right, let me see your harness and your rig and stuff. And I showed him. He goes, where'd you learn to do that? And I said, well, that's what we did at Bragg. He goes, Jesus Christ, that isn't what you do out here. And he started, and of course he took it all apart and rebuilt my thing and re-rigged the way I carried my 16 and issued me a shotgun and a whole bunch of other firearms. I was like, what the hell are you doing with all these firearms? And he goes, you'll see, just give it time, but you want to be proficient with all these things, because I'd never fired a shotgun in combat. I never carried, he issued me a Walter PPK, I think it was 9mm to hide, for a hidden weapon in my back. And I thought, oh, why the hell would I do? I remember this little gun. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is like a squirt gun. What the hell are you going to do with something like this? And he goes, you just, You just carry this around. I want you to shoot it, And anyway, he took me under his wing and just became my mentor while I was over there, and changed my whole thing with going out on patrols and working with the mountain yards and all the stuff that I was doing there, in addition to my radio operator responsibilities.
And so you said you had 2 companies of Montagnards there?
Yeah, the area we were in was the Hre tribe, which is spelled Hre, pronounced Re, and they're fierce little fighters. I mean, they were brutal out there, and they did not want Charlie messing with their areas and their hamlets and stuff like that. And they were perfect, because I remember when I went out on my first patrol and we got ambushed, and I ended up diving on the road. We were just right outside the camp, and we got ambushed on the way back in, and I dove down on the road, and of course, you don't dive down on the road. Everybody's diving off to the side in the bushes and shit. And that's the first time everybody was no shit really shooting at me. And I just went flat, and I was frozen. I was scared shitless. And I remember I think it was the senior weapons guy that was out on patrol with me. And I remember pulling out my 45, because I was laying with my cheek down on the road, and I was looking at him, and he pulled out his 45, and he had been yelling at me, "Get off the road, get off the goddamn road. Woody, get off the road." And I just was frozen. I was scared. I was so scared. And he had his 45 out, and he was aiming at me. And I looked in his eyes, and I thought, shit, he's going to shoot me. He's really no shit going to shoot me. And I remember doing a scramble off the road real quick and diving off to the side of the road. But I was so scared, man. I mean, just, having bullets flying at you when you're a kid for the first time.
Yeah.
That's a sound like nothing else you've ever heard, and for me, that was my wake-up call. I'm in the shit. I'm in the real shit now.
So what was your team's mission in that operational area? I mean, was it just to pull security, keep the VC out?
Well, it was a combination of reconnaissance of what the Ho Chi Minh Trail was doing. I call it the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Of course, the trail was further back, but these little sprigs that came off of it were bringing supplies and men, troops, manpower going back and forth, etc. And so our job was to monitor what they were doing and keep track of them, as well as secure the area that we had. We had in our area, we had these hamlets in and around us, and the VC were coming in and taking the young men. And they were kidnapping them, and they were threatening the lives of the chiefs of these hamlets, and so our job was to secure that area, and our mission ended up being that we couldn't in a wide out kind of an area secure all that, because we didn't have enough manpower. So we ended up trying to relocate them in and around the camp where our indirect fire support, which was all come on, brain, mortars. We had mortars, and we could only range out so far,
right,
for fire support without calling in air. So we brought them in close enough that we could secure that area. And of course, these people didn't want to be pulled out of their hamlets that they've been in all this time and move into the in and around the camp, and we ended
this
up
was the strategic hamletting.
Yeah, exactly. That's the term. And so it was tough. I mean, we literally had to force them out of their hamlets, bring them in close, and then we ended up burning their hamlets and denying Charlie.
That didn't make friends.
Denying Charlie that system of what they were using as support.
So how did it, I mean, that must have been hell on you guys and the Montagnards you worked with, that you have to go to the civilian population and force them out of their homes.
Yeah. I hated that. And from the first time that I was involved with relocating these people. And of course, Charlie would, when we started doing this relocation, Charlie would come in and start ambushing and probing and stuff. And so we ended up in these firefights, and in some cases with the civilians getting caught up in the middle of this stuff. And it was a horrible experience for me. I loved the Montagnards. I stay in touch with some of the Montagnards here in the United States, and I loved them. I just developed a real deep love for these people, and I hated that. I used to go into the hamlets and play with the kids. Because we'd always have goodies, candy, and all this stuff, and I'd go in and I loved playing with the kids and stuff, and so I had this relationship with the families and stuff, and I hated that.
How did that initiative turn out in the end?
Well, it worked, but did it work?
Right.
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 I mean, we look back and we think, well, I mean, when you read the history of SF and Vietnam and stuff, you say, well, you know what, it was successful. Well, yeah, it was successful, but it wasn't successful. And I think from a sustainability standpoint, it wasn't successful.
Right.
I mean, from an immediate, we're pulling those people out of Charlie's grasp and stuff like that. Yeah, that was successful, but that was not a good strategy for what we were doing, the way we were doing it. Of course, we can all sit back and armchair the whole Vietnam thing, but I think from a special forces standpoint, it was a solution that met an immediate goal.
Right.
And we look back and go, okay, that works.
Right.
Charlie can't take that. But from the standpoint of looking at it in the broader sense, I'd have to say that wasn't a good one.
Well, it's sort of unfortunate because, you say that we can sit there and sort of armchair it now, but we can't really, because Afghanistan and Iraq showed us that we still hadn't learned the lessons from Vietnam.
Yeah, and our counterinsurgency doctrine to this day is, like step one, safeguard the local population, because otherwise they get driven into the hands of the enemy.
Right.
And we've tried to do that in different ways. We had village stability operations in Afghanistan. We had the surge in Iraq where we sent all these troops to try to, exactly that, safeguard the population so they weren't going to Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
I think me and you both have our opinions about it, but Chuck, you were involved in special forces and continue to be from Vietnam to today. If you were to look at it, did we learn lessons from Vietnam? Why the hell do we keep doing the same thing over and over again?
Well, it's interesting because I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to have served after that period when I went back in 1985 and then retired in 2006. And when I retired, I ended up in graduate school in 2013 when my late wife passed away. And from 2013 till this last December 2019, I've been in school full time. And while I was in school, I was involved in a study of special forces. Now, looking at it academically, which I had never done, and it was a real eye-opener to me and by the way, I did a lot of interviews, and one of the guys I interviewed was David Petraeus, and having him talk about COIN, counterinsurgency operations, and how the impact of what he did with doctrine at the time that he got involved with Iraq, and the look at, because he even wrote a paper, if you're familiar with this, he wrote a paper on Vietnam while he was in school. And so he had that experience of studying what we did in Vietnam and what worked and what didn't work, and then looking at what was going on in Iraq, and even getting involved. I guess he did a little bit with Afghanistan. And you look at that, looking at when we go into in a COIN type of operation, and we're dealing with a population, a culture and we're trying to deny an enemy of taking over that population, what works and doesn't work. And so I got a chance to go back in and really study that with some very smart people that were looking at, Afghanistan. Unfortunately, a lot of my friends go, Chuck, you didn't miss anything, not
Right.
being in the sandbox. Trust me, buddy, that was a good one for you. However you missed that, good for you. But I didn't end up in the sandbox, but I ended up looking at some of the stuff that we were doing over there. And the whole, one of Petraeus's big things was, and we didn't do this in Vietnam, we brought the population to us, and we remained in a secured area. Populations around us, so they're kind of with us, but they're not with us. We're not embedded with them. And one of Petraeus's things is we've got to be embedded. We've got to be a part of the communities. We got to be like, I think he referred to the New York Police Department. We got to get a baton and walk the beat and get to know the businesses and get to know the neighborhood and let them get to know us and really live with them. And that was interesting because now, how the hell we would have done that in Vietnam, I don't know.
Right.
Back.
It's also not going well for the New York Police Department right now. I just want to put that out there.
I probably shouldn't have brought that up
Yeah.
with the New York Police Department, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
As far
Yeah,
as
of course.
embedding yourself into the community and
Right.
and letting them get to know us and we get to know them and really be a part of that culture and language and studies of culture and embedding with them are big things that for COIN, at least from an academic standpoint, seems to make sense. Now, I've not been on the ground in Afghanistan, and so I don't even want to comment.
Yeah. What, for people who want to sort of study up on it and for people who you feel have done it right in the past, what resources, books would you recommend? What units or countries would you recommend studying?
Well, the and of course the Middle East is such a great learning platform for us to look at and go, what's worked and what hasn't worked more recently. But those of us that are kind of sitting back now and we're looking at the world and what's going on in the world and we're thinking, okay, so what do we need to do in the future? How do we win these cultures and these populations to see things our way and be able to support them in a way that has some sustainable period of time and not this, because one of the problems we have, just I'm going to say this so I get it off my chest, is our leadership, and I'm not commenting on the current leadership, just our leadership in
general,
our country,
right,
makes the final decisions. People go, well, you were in the Army, why didn't you guys do this? When you're in the Army, you don't make the decisions on necessarily where we are, what we're doing where we are, and how we're prepared for being where we are. One of the things that I've had some discussions about some academians is like, the special forces and you guys are all over the world, you're in 80 countries. And I said, yes, and that's one of our problems.
right,
We're like a thin layer of butter all over the damn world. And in some cases, we're being misused,
right,
misdirected. We have the wrong missions.
right,
And in other cases, they're expending stuff. And one of the things I've always felt about special forces is we're trained before we go in to study and prepare and learn and, language and culture and all this stuff we do before we go in. And we're pulling teams from one part of the damn world and putting them in the other part of the world. And we have this whole thing of, let's put some SF guys in there and everything's going to be okay.
right,
Mentality. And that's, number one, that's not the answer anyway, but that sure isn't the answer for SF. And then you have these, between the State Department and our government leaders, these people don't even understand special operations.
right,
And they sure as the hell don't have a good grasp on these various areas in the world and the cultures and that kind of stuff. And they want to throw something at it, throw some money and throw some throw some teams in there, and and then it's done.
Right.
And then they want to pull us out.
Right. And leave people essentially.
Exactly. And you have that. Don't get me going on this. I get so fired up.
We'd like to get you going on this.
The political leadership of the United States and how that leadership uses the military just burns my butt.
One of the things I noticed too that I observe is wherever we send special forces, we train the indigenous population like right out of the Ranger handbook in most cases. Like it's American infantry, American military tactics. And it's like, hey, this is a tribal culture. This is a little clan. This is a militia in the Middle East. They don't have the table of organization and equipment that we have in the United States military. I mean, just for instance, our infantry tactics are predicated around having indirect fire, for instance.
And strong NCOs.
And strong NCOs and airstrikes. And we work in a joint environment with all this intel, everything else. You're training now a foreign population, a foreign militia. They don't have any of that. They have guys wearing flip-flops with rusty Kalashnikovs.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And I think
was that, Jack, was that a question or?
Well, I was curious what your thought is about how we go around the world and we try to create like a mirror image of ourselves rather than tailoring the training towards that specific environment and that specific conflict.
Right. And I guess what I would say to that is there isn't enough study and spending time. One of the things that I came up with this concept that they actually want me to write and present to SOCOM with the idea of how do we solve this relationships with these different cultures long term? And my answer was, you rotate these teams in and they're there for 6 months or they're there for a year or the length of time that you leave them there, and then you rotate them. And so the culture there is like finally getting to know the team leader and the team sergeant and the various team members, and they develop this relationship, and pretty soon, boom, they're out of there, and then there's a new team and they're starting all over. That doesn't work. And as you bring it up, some of these cultures have these relationships, these tribal relationships that go on for centuries. And then these, the SF guys, these American soldiers come in there and go, we got the answer. Listen, we've got the beans, we got the bullets, we got everything you need, and all you got to do is listen to us and get our training, and boom, we're going to take control of this area. And then, the next one comes in and he might give a shit or not give a shit depending on how he feels about the culture. And so we have this constant disruption. And one of my answers was, let's take some guys that are out but have this background and have this experience and put them into these various areas with this depth of experience and training and culture and leave them there. They stay there. And then if you're rotating teams, but there's somebody
They're the
that's
liaisons.
constant, so you've got this thing that goes, no, we don't do it that way. We use the camels, or we do, we use them in their, because they teach us stuff, as you know. We learn a lot from these cultures because they've been doing this for hundreds and thousands of years or whatever, right? And then we're going in there and telling them, okay, you wear a 6-gun and you shoot the plate out of the sky and boom, everything's going to be great. And they're not like, wait a minute. They fight in these mountains this way, and they know how to fight in these mountains. And maybe we don't know enough about how you fight in these particular mountains, that kind of stuff. So anyway, so one of my solutions was that we just move some leadership and some constant teams in that stay there. And we got guys that'll do that. Okay, I'll go to Afghanistan and I'll stay there for 5 years, let's say. And you have that relationship there, and you have that knowledge and everything that they learn that you pass on. Because one of the other things we don't do real well is hand off. I've been here for a year or 6 months. Here's what I learned. Here's the do's and don'ts. We don't do that homework really well for these handoffs. Never mind, we're pulling a team from, Southeast Asia, and we're putting them in, goddamn, over in Afghanistan, and they don't have that preparation and that training and stuff.
You guys have talked about the sort of the hard skills, right? How we fight war versus how they fight war and things like that. When you were going through this academic program, when you were in school, did you find that academia in general, that they didn't get the idea that we can't go over there and turn them into America? It's that there are moral systems in place, religious systems in place, that we're not going to talk them out of a 200-year-old blood feud with their neighboring tribe based on our ideals. I mean, because there's a lot of cultural stuff that goes into that too, that I think that a lot of our politicians and a lot of our, university people just don't understand, that these people are completely different than us in so many ways.
Well, that's interesting that came up. One of the things I did when I went back to school, I ended up getting a joint bachelor's and master's degree, and part of that program forced me into culture studies, cultural competence. And at the time, I remember going into this first class. You guys would love this. I'm sitting in this class with all these kids. Obviously I'm a little older. I got all these kids, and we're holding hands and singing Kumbaya and all this shit. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm in the wrong class. I need to get the hell out of here because this isn't going to get it. But then when they started getting into the actual study of culture and the significance of culture, and I realized through my almost 25 years in Special Forces, I got Zippo in cultural training, and the only cultural training I really got was when I was deployed, and I'm in and amongst the culture, and I'm going, holy shit, you don't shake hands with your right hand, and you don't do this, and you don't do that, and
right.
You don't say this, and you stand back, and wherever part of the world I was, I was like clueless, and I realized, wow, imagine if we would have been trained culturally as much as we are in fire and movement and all that kind of stuff, weaponry and the stuff that we're trained for, that's important, of course. But if we don't have a relationship with these people and where we are in the world, we got a real problem. And I learned that firsthand. And so when I started taking these classes and I started looking at this stuff, one of the things that I started asking in these interviews I was doing is I started going, what could you have wanted culturally before you deployed? And how important is culture? And what I found is like, oh my God, it's like number one. It's like hugely important. And without it, we end up missing the nuances and the understanding of these various peoples in the world that we miss. And we're always in a hurry. It's like, get in, get out, bump, and, we're out of there.
Right.
And it's like, these cultures have been around a long time, and they're going to be around a long time. And how do we help them help themselves in a way that's sustainable for them?
Right.
And not got this agenda that we get from our leadership that wants us to, a short little fuse. You got this much time. Get the job done, and then I'm pulling you out because your funds are stopping, and we're going on to whatever else the priority is.
Chuck, we have a viewer question here. They're asking, did you
tell them that we don't do viewer questions? I'm just kidding.
We do when they donate.
Okay.
He's asking a question from the class. Okay. Do you think using conventional forces to try and do FID, advise, train, assist, has negatively impacted our ability to develop smart cultural strategies?
Well, this came up as part of my schooling, because I had some students with me that were also in special operations. I had some guys in civil affairs, and they were talking to me about the use of conventional forces with special operations and how effective that might be, and the cultural impact. And it's back to, how effective is the team itself
Yeah.
first before you bring somebody else in and you train them. And normally, hopefully the team is training them or the teams are training them. So there's consistency and continuity there. Because if the team is not focused culturally, the conventional guys aren't going to be focused culturally. And that whole, back to that cultural stuff is number one. If I were president of the United States right now, I would tell special ops, okay, listen, we're going to back off of a whole bunch of stuff we're doing out there because it's not special operations centric. Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, when we go in, we're going to go in to stay or we're not going to go in. Because this whole go in and then we pull them out and, and then two presidents and then we're back in.
It's like you backslide 10 years every time you do that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, how many units in the military are trained like special forces are? And I'm not trying to brag about special forces. It's got a unique mission from most of the other services. But we're trained to go in and have a lasting impact. And the only way we can do that is go in and stay in and structure it that way so we can not only make a difference, but ensure that the continuity in the future, the sustainability of what it is we've done.
Chuck, you sound very similar to, and I don't know if you know each other, but Mark Boyat. He has a very similar view about special forces and would talk about how we should have SF guys in every embassy, every American embassy, essentially around the world.
I'm trying to remember. I might make sure I'm not speaking about sensitive stuff, but we did that in Southeast Asia, where I retired from, and we started embedding SF guys in the embassies for that very reason, because they're going, okay, wait. First off, don't throw some SF guys at this issue. This isn't conducive to what SF does or special ops overall. And so we saw that happen. I'm not going to name the country right now because maybe somebody's going to call me and go, Mr. Woodson, you're talking about stuff you're not, but it's no secret.
Right.
Putting SF guys in embassies is a great idea because one of the things that we can do is educate and have a little oversight over where the teams are, what the teams are doing, etc. And I think one of the things that we don't do very well, as far as I'm concerned, is we don't educate Washington, D.C. Because, and even the Pentagon, for God's sake, the Pentagon is notorious for misusing,
isn't part of it also that it's just difficult to explain, like, look, we're going to deploy special forces to this country over the course of 25 years, and they're going to have a very slow impact in shifting the culture, tilting the needle a little bit this way or that way, predisposing them towards American policies. It's like very difficult, I think, for a short attention span society like ours to understand. Like, they understand the Ranger mission, they understand the SEAL mission. Like, I got it. These guys come up out of the water, they blow something up, or they come save some hostages. The Special Forces mission is a little harder to articulate.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. And let's be honest, Americans have a short commitment of focus. And subsequently, our leadership does. And the answer is not, let's take this out 25 years. And if we're going to go do whatever it is we're doing in the part of the world, we're going to spend 25 years.
Right.
And educate the American people. Okay, that's right. If we're going to have some impact in this part of the world, we're going to have to commit long term. Or let's don't do it.
Right.
But
and it's tough. It's tough to do when we change administrations every 48 years.
Exactly. And think about it. When the voter sits there and goes, you know what this guy said? This guy said he wanted to go in and commit to the Middle East for 25 years. I'm not voting for him. This guy says we're going to be in and out of there in 3 years or 2 years. I'm voting for this guy.
Right. Right.
So that's the guy that goes up there and goes, you know what, the American, and God bless Obama, you know, he did some wonderful things, but he drew the line. He's like, nope, we're not spending any more time than that.
In Iraq.
In the meantime, you know, we got our military leadership going, we got to spend more time there. This is going to take longer than this. This isn't going to be a short fuse kind of a thing. And Obama's thinking about, wait a minute, my voters said to me,
Right.
you said, so we're looking for you to get in and get out of there, and we're not doing that. And so it's just, we can only do in the military what our leadership either allows us to do or supports us to do.
Right. And part of that also, because a lot of our politicians are in politics for a very long period of time.
Right.
But it was really explained to me by this analyst really well one time that most American politicians don't understand that in other countries, their politicians don't know if they're going to be in power, in office, the next day. So when Americans, sort of give them the wink, when American politicians sort of give them that wink or whatever, they think, oh, America's on my side.
Yeah.
But they don't understand that.
Right. Or our government will set up not just military relationships, but economic relationships with foreign countries. And they jump through all of these hoops to make it happen for us.
Yeah.
And then our president switches over. And I'm not just talking about our current president, but all throughout, contemporary American history. And foreign countries feel betrayed. I mean, even countries like China, like, oh, we did all this work to meet your guidelines, and then you changed your mind on us.
Right.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about special forces is it's almost like it's two different jobs, right? So you have the selection that teaches you the hard skills, trains you on your physical ability. And I know they have Robin Sage to sort of test the cultural thing. But that's different than if you were to take people with no military training, dump them in dump them in another country and see who sort of thrives, right? See who gets along with people, who immerses themselves in the culture, because that's almost a completely different, I don't want to say skill set, but personality type.
Yeah.
And then finding the type of person that, one, can do the hard skills, and then two, can thrive and enjoy themselves or really wants to learn about another culture, it's a rare find. That's my comment, but do you find that that's true, or did you see that in Vietnam?
I think personally, that the leadership in SOCOM has to be able to step back. I look back to a class I had at school, back to school here. I talk about school. Hopefully you guys are like, okay, talk to us a little bit about school. But when I was in school here, the year before last, I'm with this Marine. He's out now, but this Marine, and we were talking about counterinsurgency, and he goes, the Marines really taught some lessons about counterinsurgency, and he started talking to me about what the Marines were doing. Which, have you guys heard about fourth generation warfare, and is it a term? Well, the whole back to the embedding, embedding the troops with the communities. And he was talking about what the Marines were doing, and I had no idea. At first I thought he was bullshitting me. I said, bullshit. Marines assault beaches. Okay, I know that because my dad taught me that. The Navy's not going to do it. The Air Force can't do it. The Army doesn't want to do it either. The Marines will take the beach. And, we go on the beach. You're talking about, this long-term relationship in these communities, and he's telling me these stories. And then he starts bringing up this history, and I'm like, holy shit. Mm-hmm. And you know what that taught me is you can be a shooter and you can still be culturally competent.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can be both.
Right.
And I think you have to be. I think, the whole thing about, the public looks at all special operations and think we're all got a knife in our teeth and we're knocking down a door.
Right.
And I'm telling them, I never had a knife in my mouth, number one, because I might cut myself.
Right.
And I didn't swing from a vine and come in all cammied up and, the Rambo kind of a thing. I said, I never did that. I said I was sneaking around and all that kind of stuff, but, I wasn't this husky, knock down the door and now I've had that training,
Sure.
but that was this much of my training compared to this much of my training. And a lot of my training was in relationships and interacting with and I always tell people, what do special forces do? We're teachers. We're school teachers. We teach. And these are the things that we teach. And because we're force multipliers.
Right.
Our mission is to go in with 12 and end up with a battalion or two, and disrupt. And, that was why that's our original mission. Sneak in, build a force, disrupt things, and get the hell out of there if we can alive.
So did you feel that the training...
Did I answer that question?
Yeah, and I'm just going to kind of ask you to clarify that. Did you feel that the training that you went through, in Vietnam, did you see that almost all special forces soldiers, because of that training, had those skills, or did some soldiers adapt better than others?
Well, yeah, we're personality.
Sure.
I remember I had a guy on my team, and all he could think about was getting the hell out of there. And most of us, when we were in Vietnam, it was time to go home after a while, But he made decisions about what he did as far as the team was concerned based on that. And of course, when I was there, I worked a lot with because I was the kid of the team. I worked a lot with the CA officer. We had a captain there that was doing civil affairs, and he was going into the communities and doing all of the interface and setting up the mid-cabs and all that kind of stuff, and helping support the community. That was my exposure because I was the youngest guy on the team, and he grabbed me and said, "Woody, you're with me. Let's go. We're going into the hamlet, and we're gonna interface with the community, and we're going to support them and that kind of stuff." And so I did a lot of that kind of stuff. But this other guy, he not only wasn't into that, he was kind of withdrawn. He was, I don't know, maybe he was, I can't remember if he had more than one if he was longer there than a year. Maybe he was. He might have been, maybe, but he was tired. Obviously, I could see this guy has got this kind of outlook on things, but other than those personalities, our team was interested in securing, supporting, networking. These recons we did, I remember the first recon I did with the team sergeant. He reminded me of, he was a wiry guy, and he was a little older. He had been Korea, so he was a Korean War vet.
Wow.
But, I went on patrols with the different older guys, right? So I got an opportunity to go, because we just rotated as team members, and when we went out on these patrols, and we'd go out and see what Charlie was doing and all that kind of stuff. This guy, he goes, "Woody, I'm taking you out on patrol with me, so get all your stuff ready, and we're going to leave in a couple of days, and we're going to go on." I thought, "Oh, cool, let's go out with a team sergeant." This was the first time I went out with him. I'll tell you, as a mountain goat, I wouldn't have survived. This guy never touched a trail, never touched the road. I swear we were climbing Mount Fujiyama. We were in the goddamn pampas grass and we were, the jungles, and I remember just trying to just get through the stuff, with your backpack and your weapon and stuff, and trying to get through that stuff, triple canopy. And I remember that first night, and I'm a kid. I'm 23 years old. All right. I'm a kid, and I couldn't keep up with this guy. And his answer was, he was going to go look at Charlie the back way, and come in a way that was like, Oh my God. And I remember after I went on that patrol, and we ran into Charlie 2 or 3 times, different patrols they had, and they didn't even know we were there, the way he did stuff. I was like, no, goddamn, that's the way you recon.
Yeah.
There's the way you recon this guy. And when I learned that, I thought, okay, there's a reason he lived through Korea.
Right.
And I think he was on maybe his second tour in Vietnam and maybe his third tour. But there was a reason he was around, because the way he thought about it was, I'm here to win. And I'm going to do this in a way that you're not even going to know I'm even there. And I was like, God damn, I learned some stuff from him about, moving through, how you move through stuff and where you went and all of that stuff that was just like, now, and then the other guy was like, I went out on a patrol with him. We went down the road. In fact, that's where I got ambushed on the road. Went down the road, went into a couple of hamlets, slept in the hamlet, did a little recon around it, slept in the hamlet again because we were out there for 3 days on that one, you know what I mean? And then came back down the road. And of course, I got my ass ambushed, and Woody got it shot off. And
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fact that he
Half-assed patrol.
The road.
Chuck, I wanted to ask you, one of our viewers wants to ask you too, about your experience working with the Australian military, and specifically, did you work with the Australian Army training team in Vietnam or the Australians at Recondo School?
Yeah, I had an opportunity when I finished my tour. That's a good question, by the way. Probably my daughter asked me that question. How many people know?
No, some dude named Brendan.
Who's paying in
Was it
Australian
Brendan?
dollars.
I probably know a Brendan. Anyway, the Aussies. Okay, I'm coming back because they pulled me out of the jungle. I think about a month before it was time for me to come back home, and I'm back at the thing. And by the way, I got to bring this up. Sergeant Major Dunaway, Command Sergeant Major Dunaway, was the 5th Group Command Sergeant Major. And he was one of those sergeant majors, when you saw him, you detoured around the whole thing, You see him coming, you go back in, you go back out the back door, you're good. So I'm running into him, and he sees me on the thing, and he goes, Woodson, come here. I thought, oh, shit. This can't be good, He goes, I want you to come in the office with me. He goes, Jesus Christ. He goes, you're getting ready to go back home. I said, yes, Command Sergeant Major, I am. He goes, well, what the hell are you? Because I went over as a PFC, and I made Spec 4, right? And I'm a Special Forces
Spec 4.
Green Beret comms guy. Now with the CIB, I had a Vietnamese jump wings. I'm the guy, right? And I'm a Spec 4. He goes, you're going to embarrass the goddamn entire Special Forces community. He tells the guy in his office to cut me orders to promote me to Buck Sergeant. Right on the spot. He goes, I want your uniforms and everything. When you go home, I want you to go home as a Buck Sergeant. And I said, and I'm like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, okay, I guess he can do that, So he promoted me to a Buck Sergeant. But while I'm in there, the comms, the head of the comms thing, said to me, he goes, hey, Woody, he goes, listen, when are you going home? And I said, well, I'm supposed to go home. And he goes, how would you like to go back out? And I thought, what do you mean go back out? And he goes, well, we got an Aussie team that's doing what were they doing? They were doing recon and blocking force and stuff with some conventional forces and stuff. And I think there was, as I remember, there was like 8 or 10 of them. I can't remember, but they didn't have a radio operator. And he said, so could you set up their comms thing for them? And I thought, well, yeah. And I thought, the Aussies, that's got to be fun, right? Aussies. You just think Aussies and you think, those guys are going to have some fun.
There's going to be some beer at that fire
Yeah.
base.
Yeah.
Which they did, by the way. So they took me out with, I went with a SF lieutenant, as I remember, who was doing something with them. And they put a Connex underground, and they were along, as I remember, Highway 1, and they were setting up this security thing there, and they put a Connex in the ground, and they wanted me to set up a radio thing for them, so they had comms there. And so I'm with these Aussies, and it was the funniest goddamn thing because these guys were crazy. I mean, the way they thought was like, for me, was like crazy. Like real cowboys. I mean, no shit cowboys. You know, they did this. They went out to Highway 1, this little road running up and down South Vietnam, you know, along the coast. And they stopped the traffic going both ways. And they're you know, they had their shit on and stuff, and they're out on the road, and they had, as I remember, I think they had some yards with them too. I can't remember what part of the world they were from, but anyway, they had some yards with them. And they asked me, he says, you want to go out on the road with these guys? And I thought, yeah, okay, you know, not thinking, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're out in the middle of the road on a major thoroughfare, and you're stopping the traffic, and you're inspecting for whatever. I don't even remember, weapons or whatever they thought they were looking for. And it was the craziest goddamn thing. And it was just the way they were, you know, just like, you know, Buckaroo Banzai, man. It was nuts. And so I was only with them for a couple of weeks, but I'll tell you, I had so much fun with these guys. These guys were fun. And they were business, but they just had this, and I don't want to say unprofessional, just this loose way that they looked at things that I never forgot. I never forgot those guys, but I was only with them for a couple of weeks, and I'm still here to talk about it, so we were okay.
Yeah.
So when you came home from Vietnam, did you decide to leave the military? How did that all shake out?
Yeah, they asked me, obviously, they wanted to get me to re-up, but I decided not to. They put me in this reserve thing that I never participated in, and I was pretty shaken up when I came back from Vietnam. I lost Ed Coffey, my mentor over there. Mm-hmm. There was a couple of guys that went over when I went over at the same time. We didn't fly over together, but we were sort of in, and one of them went into SOG. What did he go into? He went into one of the cross-border units that was running across borders.
Probably SOG. They were really the only unit going across the border, I think.
Yeah. He got killed over there. And another guy, and the three of us were talking about, you know, what we ought to do when we get out is let's go in the CIA. Why we thought that was a good idea or why that made any sense, I don't know. But it sounded interesting. And so our plan was we're going to get together and we're going to all go into the CIA when we get out. And of course, they didn't make it, and I thought, you know what, I don't have any drive. I got to tell you, from the time I come off the team and I spent a couple of weeks with the Aussies, I got home. I was pretty. I was out of balance. I was hyper vigilant. I was. You know, I was in this, I call it like a battle rhythm, you know? Right. And I remember, you know, a couple of weeks and all of a sudden I'm at this Christmas party and everybody's drinking and, hey, Merry Christmas and all this shit. And I'm standing at the side of the room and I'm looking at everybody thinking, what is the matter with you people?
Right.
You know, we got people dying and we got shit going on here. And you guys are, I mean, they were clueless. I had friends of mine ask me where I was. They hadn't seen me in a couple of years. And I said, well, I just came back from Vietnam. And they were like, you know, nothing. You know, they were clueless. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, that was the end of the conversation. You know, and I didn't have anything that I could relate to at the time when I first came home. that made any sense, that kind of wrapped things up for me and gave me okay, now I see how this all fits, and I see my little place in the world and whatever. I remember standing there on the side of that room in that party, and I was like, holy shit, let me out of here.
Right.
And of course, I felt guilty and shame because I came home and some people were lost and the team was still over there. Our camp was going under a huge, almost being overrun after I left. There was this stuff going on that when I left, and I felt like, shit, I should have stayed there with the guys. I'm coming home, and while I've done my time and everything, and I felt excited about being home, there was part of me that's like, you know what? I don't feel good about this. This doesn't feel good to me. I had a hard time with that.
Were you? Because this is obviously before the internet. This is before people understand post-traumatic stress. This is before a lot of this. Did you have other soldiers around? Did you have other veterans as a resource? How did you manage that, or how were you dealing with that?
That's an excellent question, and no, I did not. I'll tell you what I did have. And a friend of mine, who at the time was sort of a high school friend of mine, he got me involved in horseback riding. And actually I played polo, if you're familiar with polo with the horses, polo. And he got me into these horses, and pretty soon I'm cleaning out stalls, and I'm brushing horses, and I'm cleaning out their hooves, and I'm out there trying to stay on the horse's back, and a guy with mallet running up next to me and doing all this crazy stuff we did that consumed me enough, that I got absorbed in it enough that it was like I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, it was healing.
Right.
Because I had to care for these animals.
Right.
And these animals had these moods like, no, I don't feel like going that way. Or, horses were doing what horses do. And I had to make this adjustment to respect the animal, care for the animal, and be able to learn from the animal while I'm learning for myself, And it turned out to be therapeutic. And I did it for a few years, and thank God I did it. Looking back, it was like, like the big guy upstairs goes, "You will ride horses now." I'm like, what?
Right.
I don't even like horses. You will ride the horses, and you will care for the horses, and you will heal. And it really helped me at the time.
Well, it's fascinating that you found your way to that, because now equine therapy is a very real thing.
Yes, and I hear about that, and I've met some people that do it. It's a great thing. Anything where you can do where you're caring for something, especially bigger than you are.
Right.
Is a good thing, and we need that.
I
have so many people that say, "Well, I hear about PTSD, but World War II, they didn't have PTSD." No, they didn't. My dad had it.
Right.
Now, I didn't know it at the time,
right,
but I was brought up with it.
Right.
And most, I don't see how you can go into the military, be programmed in the military to do what we do in the military, and come back out and not be different.
Right.
And not be changed, and not have some issues that you need help with.
And one thing that veterans of World War II had that veterans since then haven't is a sense of closure. And not saying that they didn't have their own post-traumatic stress, and they didn't have their own challenges, but they did also have like a parade to say, it's over. Yeah. You're done. Go be somebody else now. Or, plus everybody in their generation shared similar experiences, or most of the people in their generation shared similar experiences, where if they went to a party, almost everybody there, or a lot of people, had also served, and they would have that.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, Dave.
So what after you had this job working with the horses, what was the trajectory of, the rest of your life as a young man? And you ended up back in the military, right?
I went back in 1985, and it's kind of funny because I had this guy that I ran into in the Monterey area, the Central California area, who was in one of the reserve groups. And he found out that I had been in SF. He goes, what do you think about going back in? And I immediately said, I think I did it. I think I pretty much checked that box. I played that game and moved on. And he goes, well, you know what we're doing? And he gives me one of these, goddamn tiger stripe with the beret on, with the hook out, the gapping hook out. And he goes, you know what we're doing? We're doing this harbor thing. I think it was in San Francisco, where we're going in and helping them with security, and we're sneaking onto these ships and pretending like we're going to blow them up. And he started giving me this story about the sneaky Pete stuff these guys were doing with the security, with harbor security or somebody, as I remember, in San Francisco. And I thought, no shit, that's interesting. He goes, well, yeah. And he starts telling me these stories, and I'm like, wow. He goes, and you don't have to, it's not full time, and you only have to come in and, blah, 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 blah. And I said, wow. And I remember thinking, and that's when inside me it said, once a Green Beret, always a Green Beret. Pull that off that old filthy hat and put that sucker back on, and you're good to go, And So I'll be damned if I didn't go talk to the unit and went back in the reserves, and they took me back in as a radio operator, back to a corporal. Went as a radio operator and then went on some active duty time and stuff after that. But got back in and then I retired in 2006 as a Chief Warrant Officer 4 with a very rich military career that I still carry on through the research and stuff I do academically, looking at policy and military doctrine.
So you, what year did you get out? 60, or what year did you get out?
I came home the end of 67.
Okay.
And I was officially released 3 years after that. So, but I wasn't serving during that time. So whatever that 3-year period was after that, that'd be like 68, 69, I think 70, 71, they took me off the books.
So from 67 to 85, you were out.
I was out for, I think somebody calculated it out. I was out for 17 years. It was so funny that one thing I want to mention here, I don't know if we're running out of time, but
No.
The one thing I want to mention is I come back in and they put me on this A team, this reserve A team. And the first thing these guys say is, hey, God, you're here just in time. We're going to jump into the Florida Everglades. I'm like, what? Yeah, we're parachuting in a night jump, full equipment, the Florida Everglades. And I'm like, do you guys realize I've been out for a period of time here? I don't even think I know how to parachute anymore. Oh yeah, you're going to be fine. And they had me jump off the ass end of a damn pickup, for PLFs and stuff. And the next thing I know, I'm going out the door in the middle of the damn night. You can't even see your hand, jumping into the Florida Everglades. And the only reason I didn't kill myself, frankly, was I ended up right in the water in the Everglades. And I remember going, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. You saved me. This is how I was going to die. I lived through combat, but man, this is how I was going to die. Splat right in the Florida Everglades. But I was back out of the C-130 in the middle of the night in the Florida Everglades. That was so weird, man.
What was was this 12th group in California at the time?
This was 11th group.
11th group.
Because I ended up going out to Florida.
Okay.
And with the 11th group out in the 3rd Battalion, 11th group, out of 3rd Battalion, A Company out of Tampa, Florida.
And so you come in as a corporal, right? Or
Right.
As a corporal.
No, corporal. Came back in as a corporal.
You came back in as a corporal, which I assume there weren't many corporals with their long tabs at that time.
No. Everybody was asking me, okay, because I had CIB.
Right, that's what I'm saying. You're a corporal with all this stuff that these guys How did they respond
I
to you?
remember one of the sergeants said, either you're the biggest screw up in SF, or have you been out for a while? He asked me. I said, yeah, that was it. I've been out for a while. Not that I wasn't a screw up, but I've been out for a while. So, yeah.
Did they want to hear all the stories from Vietnam? Like, because a lot of these guys, I'm sure, were younger.
Yeah, well, we didn't have. I'm trying to think. I think in the whole company we had 3 or 4 veterans, combat veterans from Vietnam. But pretty much these were. What's the interesting thing about the reserves that I really had a lot of respect for was the diversity of these guys they have in these teams. I remember we had a goddamn scientist from over on the Cape, and we had a doctor, and we had all these people that wanted to do SF stuff, but had these other lives. And so here you have these guys on the team. I remember we'd get these assignments, and you guys have to sneak in here, and you have to capture this so-and-so and so-and-so device. And we got this scientist goes, all you have to do is dismantle it. And we're all like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, that's a so-and-so and so-and-so. And all you do is take this device out and it's worthless. It's a piece of junk. And I'm going, holy shit. Thank God we have this guy here on our team, right?
Chuck, was this the Grizzly Hitch mission that you guys were working?
You mean which one?
Well, Grizzly Hitch was we were red teaming infrastructure in the United States, U.S. government.
Oh yeah, you mean way back when? Yeah. I can't remember what it was called. I ended up not doing it because I didn't stay with the 12th. I ended up going over to the 11th. But yeah, they did stuff with the power companies and stuff, checking security and
nuclear security.
Yeah, it was really cool, and actually we did some of that when I came back to the 12th. Later on, because I moved back to California. But some of the stuff that the reserves guys were doing was just like right out of a novel, for Christ's sake. It was crazy.
And so from there, an 11th group, and moving forward, I mean, where did your adventures take you in Special Forces? I mean, you said you were Warrant Officer 4. I mean, you must have been in for quite a while.
Well, you know what was interesting? The most interesting thing was when I came across Robin Moore, and you guys know Robin Moore from the
author,
Green Beret book. And I came across him, and he was telling me the stories about how they brought him in and put him through the training and stuff, and got him involved in this, but before they'd let him write the book about and support him writing the book. And he introduced me to General Sidney Shacknow. You ever?
Oh yeah, I spoke to him on the phone before he passed away.
Yeah, wonderful guy, and got a rich history. And he wrote a book. I can't remember the name of his book.
It's like Strength and Honor or something like that.
Yeah. The guy was amazing in his history and stuff. But anyway, I ran across him, and I was telling him about the idea I had about interviewing some of our older troops and stuff on video camera. And he goes, "Oh my God," he goes, "I love that idea." He goes, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, let's do something. Let's get it going. I want to," and he started opening these doors and introducing me to all these people, and he had me brief the commander of USASOC. I can't remember his name, but I hated that son of a bitch. It's probably good I didn't remember his name, but I hated that son of a bitch. He goes, "This has got nothing to do with beans and bullets, and if it doesn't, it's not a priority." Next. I'm like, holy shit. The guy I wanted to punch his lights out, because collecting history is something that we all need to do. But anyway, thank God I don't remember his name. But anyway, so he, but with Sidney Shacknow, I briefed the commander of SWIC, and Andy Anderson, Colonel Andy Anderson, who
I don't.
Anyway, a bunch of guys, including the SFA, the Special Forces Association, all these people got behind it, and I started interviewing, And the USASOC historian was tasked to bring me in, get me a camera, and start interviewing legacy guys, the guys that were around when they first stood up SF. And so I interviewed dear brain, don't leave me now. I just got to remember some of this.
Aaron Bank was one, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was trying to think of Aaron Bank. I interviewed Aaron Bank 3 times, and I interviewed Clyde Sincere and Charlie Norton and Civitello and names that may or may not mean anything to you, but guys that were around when they first stood up Special Forces back in the 50s and became the first guys in the 10th group.
All right, you got my attention, Chuck.
Okay.
Tell us their story. What did you learn through these interviews? How did it happen?
Well, one of the things that was really great was they all were very comfortable having an SF guy behind a camera talking to them about SF stuff. Mm-hmm. That was number one. So I was not only in, I was welcome, and they were real open to talking about stuff. Now, for some of these interviews, I had the historian, and this guy had a pencil up his butt. He was a pain in the ass. He was a historian.
That sounds familiar. That sounds very familiar.
But he had no relationship or ground truth with SF guys. Mm-hmm. And so these guys that I interviewed were talking to me. And of course he'd go on now, here, and they would kind of look at him, but then they would. So I had the wonderful opportunity of relationships with these guys, and when they talked, one of the things I learned was they were down home guys, man, that just happened to be where they were, kind of like me. I was where I was because I just happened to end up there, not because I said, you know what I'm going to do with my career.
Right.
Then I'm going to go do this, and then I'm going to, and then I'm going to end up here. I don't know. Maybe you can do that in life. I haven't been able to. Somebody else is playing the board. I'm one of the pieces, and they're moving me around, and I go, oh, well, okay, here we are here now. So how can we make the most out of that? But these were all wonderful guys, and their experiences and what they left us with their legacy is, to me, what's in our blood with those of us that have served after them. Because those of us that have served and spent time in the force, we kind of pick up on that. We carry that forward. It's a part of why we do it in the first place. Because I noticed that when they selected me to go into SF, there were 3 of us, or 5 of us, I think, out of maybe 100 guys. And all of those guys, the guys that I thought they were going to pick, and the skinny little guy next to me, I figured he and I were never going to make it. Because these guys were, they had the build, and they had the thing, and and they had that whole thing. They didn't get picked. The skinny guy and I and a couple other skinny guys are the guys we got picked, that got selected. And I thought back about that, and I thought, you know what it was? It wasn't how strong we were. It was the way we thought outside of the box, and the fact that we could handle endurance. We were willing to stay in it to get it done. Mm-hmm. And we had that kind of drive that they recognized through however they evaluated us. And I think Jack, you asked, how did they pick you back then? I don't know. I have no idea. But it wasn't because I was the most stellar guy around or anything. It was just that there was something there that they go, you know what? This guy might be the guy we're looking for, kind of a thing.
Chuck, I want to know more about what you learned through conducting all of these interviews. I mean, these were the original guys that were I assume, literally put on the boat and sailed over to Germany to stand up 10th Special Forces Group.
Exactly.
Can you tell us about their story, about how that came together, about how that happened, and what you learned about these different personalities and who they were?
Well, one of the things that I picked up from these guys was they were starting from scratch. I mean, Aaron Bank was building something that he had experienced from World War II, you know, that he brought forward into what was to be what he envisioned at the time, what they envisioned at the time. And these guys had, Herb Brecker and all these guys that were doing that stuff originally, they had to build this from scratch. And I mean, literally, they were going out and going, you know what? I mean, some of these interviewers were like, you know what we got to do? We got to be able to traverse a goddamn mountain in the winter. And we got to be able to ski out of there.
Right.
You know? How are we going to do that? You know? Well, we need some rope. Probably need to get some skis. I mean, you know, when you listen to how they did it,
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was there. Okay, we got this all figured out.
Right, with a manual, throwing it down on the desk.
Yeah, here's the training manual, and it's DD 7543M, version 6. You know, we just follow this. You know, they had to build these things, and they had to teach each other. And the great thing they had is they pulled some of these guys from Europe that are in these units that were in other units and had this background in all of this stuff, and they pulled them in and said, how do you ski down a mountain in the goddamn middle of the, you know, da-da-da-da-da? And how do we climb the side of this hill, you know, with this cliff and, you know, do this? And you hear this, and I mean, Clyde was, you know, Clyde Sincere?
I've heard the name, but I don't know.
Remind me, I got to introduce you guys to him because he's one of these guys. And he, by the way, he was over in Vietnam also and doing the SOG stuff. But he was telling me that people would die from this stuff because they didn't know how it was going to work.
Right.
You know, they didn't know, well, if a guy goes down the rope and he does the thing and he goes down the side of the cliff and he, you know, out of it, whoop, we just lost Bill. Oh, Jesus, you know, and I mean, just, you know, because they're learning to do something that they don't know how to do, but they have to do it for it to work.
And the parachute, well, I mean, we had a paratrooper capability, but still parachuting relatively new.
Yeah,
scuba diving.
And where they parachuted and you know, all that stuff was just you know, rudimentary.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that answer your
question? It begins to answer it, I think. But I'm interested if you have any other anecdotes about these guys and their experiences and what they did and how they kind of brought it all together.
Well, I think one of the things that I would say about them, and by the way, these guys would be wonderful on your show here, and have these guys talk to you about what they actually did, and so you're not hearing.
Yeah, well, we'd be very excited about that.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to help you round up some of these guys.
Okay,
that'd be amazing.
Some of them I know that are still alive.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I got from them was the determination to make it work, no matter what. Mm-hmm. Whatever it took, they felt the commitment of the mission to do what Special Forces needed to do from the very beginning, and they were all willing to put everything into it to make it happen. That's the one thing that all of those guys that I interviewed all said was, you know what? In a lot of cases, we didn't know if we could do this, but we knew we had to do this.
Right.
You know, we had to be able to have these capabilities. And all of this stuff that today goes into the foundation stuff of special operations and the training and stuff goes back to these guys and their determination and commitment to follow through and take it to a place where they could actually execute it.
And the learning curve must have been so phenomenal because they had to, not only did they have to learn what capabilities they needed, right? I mean, they had to kind of create it. Well, we need this capability.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, you know, you mentioned like, going across a ravine or down a cliff or whatever. Well, now we need to learn how to tie knots. You know, now we need to learn, basic climbing tech.
Yeah.
And then
what kind of rope works?
Right.
You know, what will survive the scaling the side of a cliff kind of a thing? You know, all of these kinds of things that today we know
Right,
we
you
use
take-
this rope because there's a real. Well, back then they didn't know.
Right.
Will this rope work? Where'd we get this rope?
Right.
Kind of a thing. And the same with the parachuting. Where they parachuted, when they parachuted, what did they parachute with? What equipment did they carry? All of that stuff was
It's amazing.
because what their reference was World War II,
Right.
right? This we did. Now we're in the 50s. We've got Korea just starting to go on. They're actually starting to deploy teams over to Korea to do some of the offshore stuff and the stuff they were doing over there, recon and etc. But I mean, that break of time is what, 10 years or more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they're back and they're going, okay, what?
I'm interested
what's
to hear your thoughts on this, Chuck. But one of the things I know more from interviewing the Vietnam generation is that it struck me as they were really blue collar guys. The military was not a cool thing at that time at all. It was as one guy remarked to me, it was not popular to be in or to stay in at that time in Vietnam and after the Vietnam conflict. What really struck me was that the Green Berets of that era, they really, really wanted to be there. It was not so much about like the prestige or acolytes of the public. That didn't exist. There were,
That's true.
And so
true.
it really struck me that they were all there because they loved special forces.
Yeah, that's true. And I was fortunate to be there, as young as I was, and be around the guys that I was around. Some of the team that I served with is still around today, and we stay in touch with each other. But we're dropping like flies, obviously. But these guys that really brought me into special forces and provided me with that oversight and that schooling and that training was, I couldn't have asked for a better group of guys at the time, both through training group and while I was in Vietnam, because that stayed with me when I came back in 1985, because I had that anchoring that said, this is what SF is about.
Yeah, yeah.
This is why in my heart I'm here. And I could always make decisions and have influence on the team in a way that said, no. That isn't the way we approach this, because one of the things that I always remember was the scenario of we need to take hill number 755. And that's our mission, take hill number 755. Well, a conventional unit go, "Hi, yes sir, hooah, here we go. We're gonna go take that hill." An SF team's gonna go, "Why do we want this hill again?"
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, because well, we need this, and we need to, down. Okay, we need the hill, but is there another way we could do the mission without taking the hill? And by the way, if we take the hill, do we need to frontally assault it? How about if we go around the back and come in the back door or through a cave, or you know what I mean, or nuke it with a whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? That they taught us to think like that, where it's like, okay, that's the mission. Why is it important? And then if it's important, how's the best way to do it without, jeopardizing the entire team, and you know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
One of our viewers asks, what did you do from the 80s to 9/11, which I think we talked about a little bit, but I'd definitely like to hear more. And what changed with SF in that time? Do you see parallels from that time to now with the slow of the global war on terror?
Well, a lot of, first off, let me say that a lot of what I did when I went back in, I injured myself in a parachute jump. I can't remember exactly when after I went back in. It wasn't the night we went into the Everglades, however. That's when I should have killed myself that night, but that wasn't the night. But anyway, I injured myself, and I was off the team for a period of time. I broke my ankle in 4 or 5 places doing a night jump at Benning. And yes, it was my fault. I anticipated the ground. It was a night crop, and I screwed up. And anyway, so they pulled me off the team and they put me in headquarters as an operations guy, and they found out that I could type, that I knew operations, and that I was good at interfacing and interacting with the different teams. And so I ended up being a headquarters puke for a fairly long period of time until I became a warrant officer. And then when I became a warrant officer, I continued. I moved from company level operations to battalion level operations, and was involved in a lot of exercises and stuff. And then I subsequently went active for almost 3 years in the Pacific Theater, and again was at a Special Operations Command Pacific, again in operations, doing operations planning in coordination with First Group and stuff that were in the Pacific Theater. So I did a lot of operation stuff, and one of the things that I noticed was the relationships, because now, we're back in the military and we're dealing with these socks and
The T-socks.
Yeah, theater socks. And a lot of people don't understand what those are, but basically they're co-located with the theater commanders of the different, each of the different theaters, and the SOC's responsibility, the theater SOC is a responsibility to oversee and manage special operations activities in that theater for the theater commander. And he's supported and coordinated with SOCOM, but he reports directly to the theater commander and advises and coordinates, and in some cases directly oversees special operations activities in that theater. And so all of a sudden I'm in this, I'm a warrant officer now, and I'm in this operations center at a SOC, and I'm dealing with the theater operations. And now there is a place to throw your warrant officer. Throw him right in the middle like a grenade. Open the door, throw the warrant officer in, and close the door, and watch what he's going to do with a theater operations center representing special operations. And one of the things that I found out through that experience is in some cases, and I want to be very careful the way I say this, but in some cases, the lack of understanding of special operations through the leadership of a theater command. And my job, I wasn't the commander of the TSOC, but I represented him, and I was involved in operations planning and coordination. And it was interesting to me how these decisions are made, because that theater commander makes those decisions. And he's directed by either the Secretary of Defense or the President, and he is the man. He's the man on the ground. And he's deciding go, no go, how we go, when we go, who goes, all that stuff. And I was fortunate enough to work with some very, very smart theater operations planners, as well as theater SOCs and their operations leadership. And I also was thrown in the pool with some guys that had no clue how to use special operations. And man, I was like, holy shit. So this is how decisions are made. Mm-hmm. And this is who's making these decisions. Mm-hmm. And this is the impact it has on the end result from those decisions.
What were some of the more like shocking examples of that, of people who didn't know how to use it, not by name, but by how they...
Yeah. I want to be very careful, because I know I'm already going to get some phone calls from tonight going, what the hell were you talking about? But some examples were, like a good example was, we had this incident, I won't say in what part of the world, and we had and we needed some eyes on the ground. And of course that's a perfect use at that time of either the SEALs or the Marines or SF. Now, a recon kind of a thing is you start narrowing it down. Do we need an SF team to do recon? Might the Marines be better or might the SEALs be better? But, what do we need? That's the way I'm thinking. I'm stepping back and going, okay, what do we need there? And then after we recon, what? What is that team going to do and what do we need done there and blah, 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 blah. And then you can start weeding out, who would be best for this and who's available, who's near, that kind of stuff. They didn't have that. They didn't even think about that stuff. They're like, let's put an SF team in there. That's the answer. I get an SF team. And thank God the head of the operations senior officer was prior SF. And so, we had this general in there that was like, well, now, this came from, I won't say even what branch of service this came from, but the branch of service, the guy was like, he had no clue. Mm-hmm. And I was already thinking, now, wait a minute, this looks like something that would be good for, for me, for those either the Marines, either the Rangers, and who did we have nearby that we could, blah, 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 But I just and they were making decisions because this was like no shit, wheels up in the next 10, 12 hours, and we need to, and it was that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. That was like, thank God they have theater socks, and that's their purpose. That's why they're embedded with the theater commanders, and that's their responsibility. And so. Yeah, without naming names and pointing the finger, it's that kind of stuff where they have no clue. It's like me saying, well, let's send the Air Force in. Well, yeah, who from the Air Force?
Right.
What are you trying to do? And, send some jets over there.
Right. Send a plane.
Yeah, exactly. Drop some bombs. That'll take care of them.
Yeah.
Chuck, as far as your historical work on special forces, is it possible for the public to use these resources that you developed and go and see these interviews?
Well, unfortunately, no. A lot of the interviews that I've done are housed in the Department of Directorate of History at USASOC.
Oh yeah, they'll never give those up.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, come on, bring the public down, and we'll show and tell. The interviews that I've been doing for the Special Operations Association over the past few years, those interviews are not released to the public either, because they're for that body of people that have served, and those are not publicly accessed. The interviews that I've done for what's called the Special Operations Research Database, which I started with Professor Orion Lewis from the Middlebury College in Vermont, we have about 50 of those interviews. Those interviews are currently unavailable to the public because they're for the military and lessons learned and policy and military doctrine and the academia that research and study that stuff. So, however, having said that, I have some interviews that have been released to me personally of some of those interviews, and those interviews I plan on making available because I have permission to, and on some format which up to now I don't have currently and is not available. So okay. That's the bad news, and that's the good news.
Let us know when you get that up, and we'll definitely let our viewers know about that. I know the people who watch this show are 100% interested in hearing it straight from the horse's mouth like that.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We'd be happy to plug that.
Until then, the Team House is kind of the
It's your only source, folks. Stick with us.
Chuck, no, this has been awesome, man, and I think we could do it again. We've had you for about 2 hours now, and I was going to ask if you can stay like an additional 10, 15 minutes to do the bonus segment with us after the show, if that's okay.
Okay.
I have a question for you. Do you have anything, Dave?
I actually have, we have one viewer question. Oh, actually, just a viewer comment from Gordon Bradbury. Thank you very much. He said you're a great communicator. And he just said, good to see you, Dave, by the way. And thanks, guys. It's great to be back. And it's great to, Chuck's been a fantastic guest to come back, be my first one back. So, my question is kind of two parts. One, were you ever able to tell that drill instructor the effect that he had on you?
That's one thing I've always regretted, is not being able to go back and give that guy a big hug and thank him. And I think it would have warmed his heart to see what happened with me from his guidance.
Sure.
But I'm hoping that wherever he is today, he has some connection that would provide the fact that he knows that he had that kind of an impact on me, because that decision has stayed with me through to today.
Right.
And had an impact on the fact that I'm sitting with you guys talking about this stuff.
Right.
So pretty amazing. But unfortunately, no, I didn't.
In the second part of that is having gone from sort of this intentional ne'er-do-well, right? And somebody who was intentionally self-sabotaging yourself.
I like that, Dave. Good.
Self-sabotage, yeah. So, whether it was in the military or out of the military, was that ever an influential piece for you when you were dealing with a person who was maybe in a similar position, or did it change how you viewed people in general, that what kind of nudge it might sometimes take them to self-correct?
Well, that's a really, by the way, that is the most awesome question of the night. And the answer to that is yes, that stayed with me, because going back to school at this time in my life, and spending the last 7 years in school full time, I've been around a lot of young people. And young people tend to go, oh, okay, we got a grandpa in the class here. Let's, make sure we've got some oxygen on hand in case he can't hang on with us, or whatever they're thinking. But through the years, I found that both young men and women have come to me and said, hey, we heard the way you answered that question, or we heard your comment, and I'm curious about this or that or the other. And I've ended up offering advice to young people in varying areas of their life, anywhere from, should I dump my boyfriend? He's a real, and I'm always like, yeah, dump him. Dump him. I wouldn't hold on to him. To more, with my career and what I'm planning to do in the future, and what you think about what maybe I should be thinking about at my age, and that kind of stuff. And so I've always think back to that drill sergeant and think, what would he have done with this young woman or young man, and what he would have said, And I've done that for young people, and I can't sit here and go, well, thank God I helped him or whatever. In a lot of cases I don't know, but I've been free to offer what in my life experience I hope will help them at an age that I was in my younger life, when I was trying to figure it out. Because let's face it, even now in my life, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Right. I think that's the great secret, is that we're all constantly trying to figure it out at any given point.
Exactly.
Some of us just look a lot more confident when we're trying to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's also the natural state of humanity. It's like, we're not designed to live in utopia and like have it all figured out and be comfortable all the time. Right. We don't do well in that environment.
Exactly.
And there was one.
No, I think we got him.
Yeah, it was just Woody. What happened to John Nettles? Lost track of him. Also, that's from Raul Rivera.
Okay, I don't know. John Nettles was one of my mentors at the 11th group, and I don't know. I remember he was a sergeant. No, he was a master sergeant in operations, and he was a great mentor for me. And then when I became a warrant officer, he again schooled me and trained me, because when I first came out of warrant officer school, I was like, I didn't remember. I was supposed to salute, and people were saluting me. He goes, God damn it. Remember, he dressed me down. I can't remember where we were. He goes, God damn it. When somebody salutes you, that's a appointment of expressive of respect, and you better, and he chewed me out. And I was like, holy shit, I forgot that, I'm a wobbly one right now, and I'm supposed to be saluting these guys.
Right.
And I remember he was that kind of a guy. He was like, hey, this is military, what's the word I'm thinking of? Military
Discipline.
Etiquette.
Yeah. Yeah, military etiquette. That's the word. Military etiquette. And so he kind of helped me go from a sergeant first class to a warrant officer 1. And he was around at that time and really was a tremendous help to me. And I have a lot of respect for him to this very day.
Well, guys, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Please remember to like and comment on the video, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And remember to hit the bell icon also, so that you get notified when we go live. There's also a link down in the description for our Patreon if you want to support the stream and keep us going. It's actually thanks to all you guys that we kind of built out the set and fixed our audio, and it's still a little bit of a work in progress, but it looks a hell of a lot better than it did. And that's kind of because of all you guys out there who supported the stream. We really appreciate it. Next episode 59, next Friday, it's going to be on 9/11. And we have a FDNY firefighter, a retired firefighter who was there that day, that we're going to interview. He'll be here on the show, and he has a hell of a story to tell.
Yeah.
So we're excited for that. Thank you again, Chuck. We'll do the bonus segment with you.
I just want to say we're at 9,000 subscribers now. Please share these videos, because when we get to 10,000, Jack's hair comes off. Jack's hair comes off.
Dave bravely volunteered me to have my COVID hair buzzed off.
I'm selfless like that.
Yeah. No more of that after that, huh?
Yeah. This is the longest I've ever had my hair in my life, and once we hit 10,000 subscribers, it'll be the shortest it's ever been since basic training.
Yes, I will buzz cut Jack's hair right here on set. So,
Cool.
Chuck, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing.
Well, thank you guys too. I enjoyed it.
All right. And that ends.